Namo tassa bhagavato arahato samma sambuddhassa. Namo tassa bhagavato arahato samma sambuddhassa. Namo tassa bhagavato arahato samma sambuddhassa. Buddhang dhammang sanghang namasami. Sound quality, all right? Sound is good? Yep. Hello. Nice to be with you. As I was saying to Yom Si, I've just come back from a fabulous trip to Sukhothai and what's the other one? Ayutthaya. And I was thinking who were the Ajahn Chahs of Ayutthaya and who were the Luangpor Mahabuas in Sukhothai, but also who were the Yompungs in Ayutthaya and the angel groups, and who were the Tanjokun Puttatats of this whole lineage of Buddhism has been going on in Thailand for 700 years, is it, or longer? 700. That's extraordinary. It's just extraordinary, kind of, for me, extraordinary feeling of the depth of culture here. And we don't have the recordings of the Ajahn Chahs of Sukhothai because there were no recordings. But we have a culture. We have a culture that we come together and we meditate together, and we understand the 8 precepts and the position of a monk and a lay person, and that's one of the richnesses of one of the really great benefits I have, that I ordained in Thailand, that I learned my Buddhism not just as a technique, but as a whole cultural possibility. And that's proved invaluable for my work away from Thailand. And they sent me away from Thailand after 4.5 years, and I did not want to go. I did not want to leave. But I had a great teacher. I had 2 great teachers, and so if they asked me, okay. So I've always lived at the frontiers of Buddhist expression, New Zealand and Canada. But people love the Dhamma. You don't have to be Thai to love the Dhamma. And that's the genius of the Buddhist teaching, that it's relevant. It's relevant in any culture, in any gender, in any age. It's really extraordinary teachings, a real genius. So my own background is like, I realize a lot of you have done a lot of training in the Mahasi Sayadaw tradition, and with Chamye Sayadaw as well. Is that right? I think my own background with Luangpor Chah was not really, there wasn't a technique that he taught, except if maybe Toraman. That you could, that's it. I didn't know how to do that. But hopefully then we don't see like technique or 1 or 2 techniques as being mutually exclusive. You know what I mean by mutually exclusive? You can only do one, but you cannot not do the other, because that's not necessary. It becomes very sectarian. So hopefully that whatever I say complements, your work in the Mahasi tradition. And but as a bhikkhu, as a monk, Luangpor Chah had to establish actually a lifestyle, and a technique is not a lifestyle. But you already have lifestyles, so technique is very useful within your lifestyles. And what I was thinking of was Sanghang Saranang Gacchami. How do we define that? Because you could say you could have the Bhikkhu Sangha, the Arya Sangha in different ways, but you can't really take refuge in a person. You can certainly refer to a person, and I'm so grateful for my teachers. And I continue to refer to Luangpor Sumedho and I listen to his talks and other teachers. So I'm grateful for that, but it's not quite a refuge, because for me, a refuge is something that is always sort of available and reliable here and now. And I always start to think, like, for me, Buddhang Saranang Gacchami is refuge in Putto, in Puru, in the knowing, in awareness. And that is a refuge for me because it's always available. I can always remember Penyang Niang. I can always do that. So in that sense, it is a sarana, it is a refuge. It's not even a belief in Buddhism, right? I don't have to believe in Buddhism, or I don't even have to be very educated in Buddhism. So Buddhang Saranang Gacchami is a pragmatic, existential possibility here and now that, as Luangpor Sumedho keeps saying, it's like this. And then Dhammang Saranang Gacchami, what's that? Well, that's the truth of the way things are. And how are things now? Well, it feels like this. So the reality, like what is truth? You could say truth is Four Noble Truths, or you could say it's 2 times 2 is 4, or you could say the square root of 4 is 2, or you could do, all kinds of truths. But before you say anything, before there are any words, before there are any concepts or perceptions, Penyang Niang, right? It's like this. And that silence of knowing this moment just as it is, to me, is both Buddhang Saranang Gacchami and Dhammang Saranang Gacchami. And from that, there's a possibility of clear seeing. If I don't establish those two in any given moment, in all moments, if I don't establish that I'm not really aware of the way things are. I might be reacting. So let's say I'm on this retreat and I feel bored or something like that. Boredom is neither good nor bad. It is as it is. It's just and if I stop and say, oh, boredom is like this, that's Buddhang and Dhammang. That's what I mean by sarana, refuge. Then I can work from there. But if I just get caught in the boredom and just think a lot and distract myself, I'm not aware, I can't work with it. Or if I think I shouldn't be bored, I can't work with it. So taking refuge in Buddha and Dharma is not a judgment. It's not an analysis. It's just simply silent attention to how things actually are right now. And that is very, very simple, but actually very hard to do. It's very hard to do. And I think it's a paradox of the profound nature of Buddhist practice. Is it's actually, you don't have to read that much. There's a lot you could read. You could read, well, you know how much you could read. But actually that moment of awakening is very profound. And what we're trying to do on a retreat and throughout our lives is make that moment of awakening, Penyang Niang, it's like this, Puru, more continuous, more silent. And that we can do no matter what we experience on a retreat, whether you have a physical pain or physical comfort, whether you like being here or not, whether the person next to you is too restless or whatever it might be. You can always notice how you feel. And that refuge is a refuge in, also it's a refuge in non-desire. Like knowing the way things are isn't the same as wanting them to be a certain way. And I think that's the crux of Sanghang Saranang Gacchami. I was thinking, what's the difference between a monastery and a resort? Well, obviously a resort's a bit more comfortable. Right, that's pretty obvious, and so on and so forth, and the diet is pretty special here. So, but outside of the physicality of a monastery or a resort, and we are trying to make this a monastery, right? That's the sort of spirit of it. It's attitude, isn't it? It would be the attitude. So if I go to a resort, and then I usually want to maximize my pleasure. I pay a certain amount of money and I expect a certain kind of product. Fair enough, yeah. But obviously, in a monastery, you don't ordain to maximize your pleasure. Like Ajahn Chah would say, you didn't come here for the menu, or or whatever. You came here to understand the way things are. And so the essence of monastic life, and I think, to me, this is one of the ways I think of Sanghang Saranagacchami. The essence of it is self-surrender to a particular style of living, to a particular rabiyab that is not set up by me. So when I went to Wat Pong, I could say to Ajahn Chah, hey, could we have less morning meditation? And he would say, you what? So I didn't have a choice. Well, I had a choice. I could stay or leave. I often wanted to leave, but I didn't. So that although I didn't have the freedom to organize my agenda, I had the freedom to watch my desires. And that is the essence of self-surrender within a vehicle. So that's what we're trying to do here. We're trying to create a kind of Sangha vehicle that we just sit in our seat, and no one's really driving. And we try to watch our own consciousness within that. And that's a great gift, the gift of not having to make the choices. So we have a morning meditation, and we have the breakfast, and we have morning, and so on and so forth. So that's something we give ourselves to. So as Luangpor Chah would say, if you want to meditate, meditate. If you don't want to meditate, meditate. And then it's simple, right? You don't have, it's not a negotiation. Well, maybe today, maybe tomorrow, maybe I'll have a swim, and then I'll have a spa, and and no. So then you want, you wake up in the morning, well, should I meditate or not? Maybe I'll just sleep till breakfast. No. Okay, that's what my mind says, Penyang Niang. But now what do I surrender to? I surrender to the Sangha vehicle. So I wake up and I feel, oh, I don't know. I don't want to meditate. That's fine. But I give up or surrender to, now's the time to meditate. And then that does become a refuge, because it's no longer my desire pattern. It's no longer my organization principle. It's a principle of us as a group deciding to practice together and to do something very wholesome. And the results are very good, because the results are not based on desire. They're based on self-surrender. So sometimes lots of times you don't want to meditate. Doesn't matter. You don't have to think about it. And I found that incredibly valuable at Wat Pong, because lots of times, even evenings, there's mosquitoes, don't want to meditate, or Luangpor Chah would be giving long talks. I didn't understand Thai. I don't want to be here. I want to go away. And no, that's not honorable. The honorable thing is to stay. And then I could watch the desire to leave, desire not to sit there for so long. And then what's up? Penyang Niang. Okay, this is what desire feels like. Okay, now I've got the teaching. Desire feels like this. Huh? And that's the essence of the Four Noble Truths, isn't it? Whereas if we just reorganize things according to our own desire patterns, well, then okay, that'll be like that. But that's not to say that if you're sick or you have needs, that you can't not come to the meditation. We're mature human beings. So the real reference point around that is, what's the difference between need and wanting? We all have needs. But usually our wanting is greater than our needs. So our needs are four requisites: food, clothing, shelter, medicine, those kinds of things. And then we give up to this. Now, having said that, it's a really great place to give up to. You have to admit, it's a good deal. But to expect that you like a retreat, right? That's a disaster. Because if you think, I'm gonna go here, it's gonna be really nice, and I'm gonna really enjoy it. Oh, I don't know. But I'm going to go to the retreat and just observe liking and disliking. Yeah, now that's talking Dharma, isn't it? Then it's okay. Like is like this, and dislike is like this. And what this kind of practice points to is transcendence, or that that peace of mind which is not dependent on conditions. That's what we're looking for, because the Buddha realized something which was not dependent on physical comfort, was not dependent on age, wasn't dependent on the sankharas, sankhan, right? It was asankata, it's beyond the sankharas. And what could that be? Well, that couldn't be based on desire, because desire is always looking for something, but it's based on the letting go of desire, nirodha, cessation. And those moments where you don't want anything, you don't want to figure anything out, you're not trying to get anywhere, do anything, they're really actually very beautiful moments. They're very ordinary. So this idea of surrendering also is the idea of surrendering to what you're feeling. Like sometimes meditation people think they should feel something. Like maybe you think you should have metta for everyone. Be nice. Yeah, but like let's say you're sitting next to someone and they're very restless, right? They're restless and you're almost in your samadhi and shut up, right? And that's ordinary because you're trying to get enlightened and they keep moving, and it's their fault, right? That you're not enlightened or something like that. And if you think that you shouldn't feel that, right? Well, then you're in trouble. Because then not only do you have your own aversion, you have your aversion to your own aversion. That's aversion squared, right? You're doing the math. But you can have principles. You can have principles of reflection. And this comes down to the issue of what we mean by contemplation. And what we said the word was pijarana in Thai. Contemplation is the use of ideas to and perceptions to allow you to see where you're at now. So let's say one of the perceptions that we have to live as a sangha is that I was just looking at the Kosambi Sutta, which is the sutta that the Buddha gives to the Kosambi bhikkhus who are arguing with each other fiercely and just cannot get along. And they're just kind of just like on each other's cases in a horrible way. And the Buddha calls them and he said there are 6 things that you should work on as bhikkhus. One is that you practice acts of loving kindness to each other, that you practice words of loving kindness to each other, that you practice thoughts of loving kindness to each other, that you share the resources of the monastery equally, that you live by the same Vinaya, and that you have the same aspiration for Nibbana. Now, those first 3, those are reflections of how you try to incline your mind. But what happens if you're just feeling very bloody-minded? You wake up and you think, actually, I hate everyone. Or, you've just got some horrible memory coming up of, someone that hurt you, and you're just in a really difficult mood, or maybe you have a memory of you hurt someone. There's a very difficult mood coming up, and then that difficult mood projects onto your neighbor. All of a sudden, your neighbor is the person. Oh, wait, no, that's not the same person, and the mood affects you. Right? So you have to be careful with idealism. And yet, if you don't have reflections, you can just get lost in your moods. So let's say I wake up in the morning and I have a really difficult mood from material that has been in my life for the past year, maybe some deep loss or deep betrayal or a fear of illness. That's difficult stuff to be with, right? And then maybe that makes me grumpy and negative, also difficult. But when the Buddha says that we should practice deeds of loving kindness, that we can do, right? Even if I really dislike you intensely, I cannot trip you when you are in the food line. I cannot kick you. I cannot hurt you physically. I can do that. Practicing words of loving kindness. It's more difficult, but it is possible. Even if I feel in a foul mood, and you come to me and you say to me, "How are you feeling?" I say, "None of your business." No. I can try. Or even if I say that, I can say, "Oh, well, I can reflect. Well, is that really what the Buddha was asking me to do?" And now that's where reflection starts to come in. Even though I'll never be perfect. It's not possible. But I can reflect on, where's my mind inclining? Is my mind inclining towards words of loving kindness? And so if I find I say something abrupt to you, or rude to you, or to anyone, and dismissive of you, I can reflect on it. Well, that doesn't sound like words of loving kindness. And I can say, okay, be careful. Be careful. Incline towards words of loving kindness, which is different than saying, "Oh, I should never say unkind words." That's idealism. And idealism is very self-destructive, because we're not ideals. We're emotional beings, and we get sick, and we have losses, and the life can be tough. I know Thai people are so smiling and friendly, but I know you all suffer too, right? You have families, and you have body, and the body gets sick, and we've had COVID. And so the beauty of Thai culture is that you exhibit a lot of joy, but then also we're human beings. So to recognize that is very important, isn't it? To really recognize, I feel really lousy today. Benyang niang. Lousy feels like this. But then, where's the language of that going? Do I believe in it? Do I believe in the storyline? And then do I just get caught in whatever it might be? Or do I try to incline towards deeds of loving kindness, thoughts of loving kindness? Now, how do you do that one? Thoughts of loving kindness. Well, you can do that to yourself, right? So as I start to, and I think this is a very important part of a retreat, that no matter what technique you do, no matter what your preferred way of practice is, there's bound to be some kind of emotional material which comes up into consciousness, which you don't want. I came here for peace. Thank you very much. I don't want all that old garbage coming into my mind. And yet that stuff is very important, because there is this idea of purification, that if we let this old material into consciousness, and we don't get caught in the storyline, in the narrative, we just know it as it feels, then it's liberated from the mind. That's one of the first teachings that Luangpor Viradhammo gave us so often, was that consciousness is the escape hatch. So when something comes up into consciousness that hasn't been processed, it can feel very real, and it is real in some sense, but it's still a memory. It's kind of like an inner Zoom meeting. You know how we had a meeting of the branch abbots of the Wat Pah Pong tradition. One was at 3 a.m. or something. I got the bad time zone. Anyway, we had monks from Australia, and Ajahn Amaro was there, and all the other monks. And I was thinking how when you're in a Zoom meeting, you're in this whole world, aren't you? It's kind of weird. And then all of a sudden I step out, and I'm with Yom Pung at breakfast, having coffee and chuckling. Right? And just like 5 minutes before, or 10 minutes before, I was in a serious monks meeting. And it was pretty heavy. It was, some heavy things we discussed. It was a good meeting. We talk well, and it was friendly, but it was some difficult things that the Sangha faces, and that's just. And I was just thinking, that's also how our moods work, isn't it? Like, you feel a mood of something nasty that happened, right? Some loss or whatever, and that mood feels like a Zoom meeting. It feels like a real reality. And then you hear the sound of a cuckoo or something, and then you're not there anymore. So it's important to see that's just a memory, but memory isn't just thought. Memory is feeling and emotion and narrative. But if you can label it as a memory, right? You can label it as memory feels like this, and then go to the body and see that there's a body component. Then during the retreat, if this kind of material comes up, it's very, very healthy. It's liberating, because it goes away from consciousness. So not to be afraid of that, but to witness it. And then I think thoughts of loving kindness would be to that very suffering being, which is called you, and you say, oh, may I be free from suffering, rather than the idealism or the story, or just repeating the storyline, because that just kills you. It just goes on and on and on. We've all been hurt by life, right? Who's free of that? You think about, like, I often think about the Buddha. Devadatta tried to kill him, tried to bump him off. Has your first cousin ever tried to bump you off? or tried to set him up, getting a nun pregnant or something like that. I mean, that's pretty heavy stuff. So if the Buddha, the Buddha is subject to that kind of abuse and misunderstanding and so on, who are we to be free of those things? We're all subject to that. This is life. Life is like that. And if we don't process those things, then they're quite often like this background, this like a pea, like a ghost. Oh, I'm gonna get you. But if we're not afraid, and we say, oh yeah, this is what it feels like to feel lousy. This is what like regret feels like. Like, have you ever done something? Like one of the ways I used to get caught as a senior monk is someone would come to me and they said, you know what they did? They did this and they did that and they did this. And I'd say, oh, really? And then I'd go to them and say, you shouldn't have said that. And I realized they didn't. I got fooled by that person. And that is the most horrible feeling, isn't it? When you've said something unkind to someone and unjustified. This is a horrible, horrible feeling. And yet that's the karma. That's the result. This is what it feels like. Now, if I don't let that be conscious and feel it fully, then it doesn't get liberated, because it's just in the background and I keep distracting. And yet if I indulge in it, I'm a terrible monk, bad monk, terrible monk, then I also am not free. So the middle way is to awaken to the fact that there is memory and it feels, in this case, horrible. And then to no longer go to thought, but go to the body. Because if you go to the body, those memory traces are tension in the body. And if you just are patient with it and feel it, it wants to go to thought, you don't go to thought, then you're neither repressing, nor are you indulging. You're in the middle way. And then they're liberated. And that is I think that's a very important part of retreats. So the way I teach is not so much a technique of samatha, but a way of awareness where all things can come and go. So sometimes it sounds a bit vague, I know, but I found if I really stick with it, then I find it very, very liberating. But within that, you can use techniques to ground yourself. And so hopefully, like I say, I can offer something complementary to what you've already experienced, something like that. So to me, the Sangha vehicle is important. And I know if Luangpor Cha hadn't created that kind of situation where I didn't have to think about it much, then I wouldn't have been able to walk. Like as many of you know, I suffered a lot from social fears, real social anxiety, and so the Sangha vehicle of an Ajahn having to give talks, that was just what I had to do. I didn't want to do it. Now I love it. Now I can't stop talking. But I didn't want to do it. But the surrender was no. If your teacher asks you to do it, you do it. And I don't think I would have faced those fears. I would have just been some, kind of more hermit type guy, because I'm basically kind of a loner. But then having to face those fears, what was that like? Well, it was horrible. It was really awful. But I knew that if I can't be with fear, I can never be free from fear. If I cannot be with jealousy, I can never be free from jealousy. If I cannot be with anger, I can never be free from anger. Now that's all sounds very negative, but I think the real freedom of the heart comes. I think the heart is just naturally beautiful, really beautiful. I think the human condition, when it's not all messed up with all kinds of conditioning, is very, very beautiful naturally. And if we can just trust in awareness and trust in the capacity to see these things as just formations, we begin to abide in a kind of background peace, which knows, oh, this feeling of lousy comes and goes. And then anicca dukkha anatta make a lot of sense. But anicca doesn't mean that it goes away right away. You know, when I felt fear, I could say anicca. Yeah, but I'm still afraid, right? Anicca says it will change. It will change, but maybe not in the pace that you hoped it would change. Huh? So when these basic teachings are actually reflective, they're very, very profound. And that's the way we do this work. So the retreat has a format, like let's say you want something changed on the retreat, and it's probably better to watch wanting, isn't it? Like you think, well, couldn't we just have like a 40-minute sitting rather than 45-minute sitting? So you go to Luangpor, psst, you know the guy. Can you just right? Well, one thing, poor Luangpor, she has to handle all the questions. So 36 people come to her with 4 little questions. Luangpor, you know, she's going to be exhausted. So it might be better to say, oh, this is wanting. Wanting feels this way. Let's say you're sitting here. And then, no, let's say I'm sitting here and there's a person here who's very, very restless, right? And I think, God, 7 days with this character? I'm never going to last. So what do? I follow desire and I sit over there. That'll be good. That'll be good. Yep. So I sit over there and I can't hear him. I want to see him. Oh God, I shouldn't have sat there. So then I look around. Oh, she doesn't look like, I sit there and I think, no, I don't know. I don't like this cushion. So I go get another. And that's like, that there'll be 7 days. You'll just be moving around and never be still, right? And that's that famous story that Luangpor Cha gave of the monk who had dog shit in his yam. You heard that one? So he has his yam and he has, excuse the language, dog shit in his yam. He picks up his yam and he goes over there and he says, oh, men, it really stinks. So then he picks up his yam again and then he goes over there and he sits and it's really stinky here too. And he just keeps him, but it's the yam, right? That's the problem. It's the mind, that's the problem. So if I'm sitting here and this person is restless and I say, oh, restless affects me this way, I don't want it. And I observe the wanting, right? And I think, oh, go away. May you be well and happy somewhere else, you know, or whatever I do. But no, this is what wanting feels like. I observe it. And then eventually, I don't even notice it. And now that's a different kind of peace than the peace of being over there. It's the peace not of circumstance, but of Dhamma. And then maybe even have compassion for the person. Oh, that's a lot of suffering to be so restless. And then maybe after the retreat, I find that they have bad eczema or something. And so that whole thing of trying to make a retreat perfect it doesn't work. It can't be perfect. There has to be something here that you don't like. I mean, there's so much to like, of course. I mean, such good people and the beautiful environment. But you take it all, don't you? Whatever comes. So if the person you're sharing a room with is a profound snorer, then Penyang Niang. Don't put a pillow on their head. Panatipata. But I mean, that's really annoying, isn't it? When someone's snoring, and then I know it says this way, right? And you just keep giving up to it. Then you're in a vehicle. Then you're in a vehicle, and that's what I found at Wat Pah Pong. I mean, I couldn't always do it, right? I mean, I complained and so on. But when I got that principle, then I began to see that the peace of the mind is knowing the way things are. And so the gift of a retreat is, if we do it like a sangha, that's what we're doing, that we don't have to change everything. We can watch the desire to change things. And that has a profound effect. So I think you're probably all pretty tired. You've come from different spaces. So maybe I'll close there.